The story begins with Eddie Morra, a struggling writer whose life has hit rock bottom. Once a man filled with ambition and dreams of becoming a successful author, Eddie now finds himself stuck in a spiral of failure and self-doubt. Days turn into weeks as he stares blankly at his manuscript, unable to write beyond the first page. His apartment is a chaotic mess, reflecting the disarray of his mind, while overdue bills and mounting debts add to his despair. His relationships are crumbling, leaving him isolated and hopeless. Every passing day feels heavier, burdened by the weight of unfulfilled potential. Eddie's once bright future now seems bleak and unattainable, until a chance encounter with an old friend changes everything. Just as Eddie feels like he's drowning in his failures, he crosses paths with Vernon, an old friend who now exudes confidence and success. Eddie, disheveled and desperate, is intrigued by Vernon's transformation. Sensing Eddie's struggles, Vernon offers him an extraordinary solution, a small, transparent pill called NZT-48. Skeptical at first, Eddie hesitates, but Vernon explains that this drug can unlock the full potential of the human brain, granting unmatched clarity, focus, and creativity. With nothing to lose, Eddie decides to take the pill, desperate for a way out of his miserable situation. The effects are almost instantaneous and astounding. Colors become vibrant, his mind sharpens, and an overwhelming sense of confidence washes over him. For the first time in years, Eddie feels like he's in control. Soon after, his frustrated homeowner confronts him for overdue rent. However, Eddie, now brimming with intelligence, recalls obscure legal knowledge and dazzles her with his newfound charm and eloquence. As they talk, Eddie even suggests a book related to her personal interests, which leaves her thoroughly impressed. Instead of pressing him for payment, she walks away smiling. Eddie realizes his life has just begun to transform dramatically. Eddie returned home after a long day, his mind buzzing with excitement. As he walked through the door, he was greeted by the sight of chaos, paper scattered and clutter everywhere. Determined to restore order, he began tidying up with a renewed sense of energy, almost as if driven by something beyond his control. Once everything was organized, he sat down at his desk, opened his writing book, and began to write. To his surprise, the words flowed effortlessly. In a single sitting, he wrote 90 pages, feeling on top of the world. The effects of the mysterious pill he had taken earlier were still strong, fueling his motivation and focus. However, the next morning, Eddie noticed the energy had dissipated. He no longer felt the same surge of inspiration. Still, he pushed forward and took his manuscript to his editor, eager to see it published. The editor was astonished by the amount of work he had completed but suggested Eddie revise it before submitting. Confident in his writing, Eddie refused, insisting it was ready for publication. Back at home, Eddie found an answering machine message from his editor, telling him that his book would be published. Overwhelmed with pride, he felt unstoppable. Driven by the success, Eddie rushed back to his friend, the one who had given him the pill. His friend, concerned, warned him about the dangers of the drug, but Eddie, fueled by his newfound confidence, asked for another dose, eager to repeat his triumph. His friend, who had initially introduced him to the pill, called and asked him to pick up his clothes from the laundry. Eddie, eager to keep moving forward, left for the errand. However, when he returned to his friend's apartment, he was greeted with an unimaginable sight: his friend had been murdered. Panic flooded through him, but before dialing the police, something instinctual drove Eddie to search the apartment. His eyes frantically scanned the room until they landed on a hidden stash of pills. Without a second thought, he pocketed them, knowing that they were crucial to maintaining his newfound power. Once Eddie contacted the police, the authorities arrived to investigate the crime scene. They encouraged him to stay involved in the case, but Eddie was distracted. The grip the pills had on him was undeniable, and he couldn't shake the overpowering desire to continue on his new path. The knowledge and drive they gave him had become intoxicating. He was no longer the man he had been before. The next day, Eddie began taking the drug again, feeling the familiar rush of energy and focus. This time, he decided to push himself even further. He went to a casino, showing off his newfound skills. His abilities seemed limitless, and he quickly amassed a small fortune. From there, Eddie visited his editor, eager to have even more publications released. His confidence had skyrocketed, and his social life flourished. Beautiful women were drawn to him, and he reveled in the attention. But his newfound social power wasn't limited to just dating. Eddie became fluent in several languages, and developed a keen interest in expanding his knowledge on every possible topic. With his increasing intelligence and newfound confidence, Eddie went to a lender to request a large loan. His plan was to invest heavily in the stock market, with high hopes of making a significant profit. The lender warned Eddie that the money had to be repaid on time, or he would face severe consequences. Despite the risks, Eddie's investments paid off, and he quickly gained wealth. The more money he earned, the more his ambitions grew. He even started rebuilding his relationship with his old love, confident that with the power the pill gave him, there was no limit to what he could achieve. In the dimly lit apartment, Eddie leans against the kitchen counter, gripping it tightly to steady himself. His vision blurs, and a wave of dizziness washes over him. His stomach churns with nausea, but something even stranger grips him, a profound sense of disconnection from reality. In an instant, everything changes. The room spins, then steadies. Eddie finds himself in a sleek corporate office, a powerful tycoon sliding a stack of files toward him. Without thinking, Eddie flips through them, processing the details instantly. He interrupts with sharp, transformative advice. The tycoon, impressed, leans back with a smile and offers Eddie a position on his team. Eddie accepts the offer, but unease gnaws at him. As he exits the office, the evening air feels heavy. The lights of the city blur, and his steps falter. Another dizzying pull overtakes him, the world dissolving around him. Suddenly, he's in an extravagant penthouse, the hum of music and laughter filling the air. Glamorous guests toast with champagne, their conversations blending into a cacophony of excitement. Eddie looks down to find a glass of champagne in his hand, the cold condensation dripping onto his fingers. The penthouse party vanishes, replaced by the dim, grimy confines of a subway station. The air is thick with the stench of oil and rust. Eddie hears footsteps, several of them. He turns to see a group of dark-clad men advancing toward him, their intentions unmistakably hostile. Without warning, his body reacts. He moves with precision, ducking punches, and striking with calculated force. Every move is executed flawlessly, but Eddie feels no control over his actions. How am I doing this? Eddie wakes in his apartment, the weight of the previous night pressing down on him. Determined to take back control of his life, he makes a decision. He won't take the pill again, not today, not with another important meeting lined up with the same tycoon. Sitting across from the tycoon once more, Eddie feels a stark difference. The sharpness, the confidence, the brilliance, they're gone. He struggles to articulate his thoughts, fumbling over his words and delivering unimpressive insights. The tycoon remains polite but distant, the admiration from their first meeting replaced by quiet disappointment. Walking home, Eddie's mind races. The pill had given him extraordinary abilities, but at an unbearable cost: the disorienting shifts, the loss of control, the terrifying question, what is happening to me? The trade-off looms large in his mind. Can he truly live without the brilliance the pill offers? Or is the price of taking it far too great? The scene shifts as Eddie watches the news, his heart sinking when he recognizes a woman's face on the screen, a tragic report of her death. He feels a jolt of familiarity, realizing she had been in the tycoon's office during their meeting. Abruptly excusing himself, Eddie stumbles out of the office and vomits in a nearby alley, his body racked with unease. Something is terribly wrong. Back at home, Eddie's panic deepens. His thoughts spiral, and he pulls out a diary he had stolen from his friend's house, the same friend who had introduced him to these pills. Flipping through its pages, he begins dialing numbers, desperate for answers. Each call uncovers a grim truth: everyone who had taken the pills is dead, with bizarre and unexplainable symptoms. Among the numbers, Eddie recognizes one belonging to a man who has been shadowing him since the day he started using the pills. Determined to understand what's happening, Eddie arranges to meet with his ex-wife, the sister of his late friend. When they meet, her revelation is chilling. She admits she once used the pills, confessing that while they grant brilliance, they come with devastating consequences. The cost isn't just physical, it's fatal. Eddie realizes he's trapped in a game with stakes far higher than he imagined. Eddie's situation becomes increasingly dire when the gangster he borrowed money from demands more of the drug instead of repayment. Cornered and without options, Eddie reluctantly hands over part of his limited supply. Realizing the escalating danger, he hires 2 bodyguards to protect him, knowing these men are ruthless and capable of deadly actions. The sense of constant threat begins to weigh heavily on Eddie, but he pushes forward. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Eddie continues his meetings with the tycoon, each one remarkably successful. His uncanny brilliance leads to groundbreaking deals and rapid growth for his company. Determined to regain control over his life, Eddie seeks out a chemist, desperate to understand the drug's effects and find a way to reverse them. Simultaneously, he hires a skilled lawyer to shield himself from legal trouble. The lawyer successfully gets Eddie temporarily cleared of allegations connecting him to his friend's murder, giving him a brief moment to breathe. As Eddie's reputation grows, he begins networking with other influential tycoons, negotiating even more lucrative deals for his business. Yet, his success is overshadowed by a growing paranoia. One evening, he returns home to find evidence of an intruder. Someone has broken into his apartment, rifling through his belongings. Terrified, Eddie decides to move to a new, highly secure apartment. Despite the added precautions, the feeling of being watched persists. In a shocking twist, Eddie confronts the gangster who has been following him since the beginning. The man is now blackmailing Eddie, demanding either more of the drug or a way to use Eddie's name to implicate him in the ongoing murder investigation. The threats force Eddie into a corner, leaving him no choice but to cooperate. As the stakes rise, Eddie struggles to balance his meteoric success against the ever-growing dangers surrounding him, realizing the drug's power may come at an irreversible cost. As the scene shifts, Eddie finds himself in yet another meeting, this time with a different tycoon for a new deal. However, he's taken aback when the usual tycoon is absent, and in his place sits the man's wife. She informs Eddie that her husband has fallen into a coma, and she will be handling his business for now. As she speaks, Eddie's attention shifts to the driver of the lady's car, an eerily familiar face. It's the same man who has been shadowing him ever since he started taking the drugs. The scene shifts again, and Eddie finds himself at the police station. His lawyer meets him there, bringing good news. All the allegations against Eddie have been lifted, and he is now free from the murder charges that had been hanging over him. In the next scene, Eddie heads to the washroom, hoping to take another pill to steady his nerves. But as he searches for the drug, he finds it's gone. Just as his panic begins to rise, a lady hands him a box, and inside, he finds the severed hands of both his bodyguards. Realizing the sinister forces closing in on him, Eddie hurries back to his apartment. There, he watches the news, and is horrified to see that his lawyer is now aligned with the very enemies who've been hunting him. His apartment is no longer safe, and the gangsters are about to storm in. Desperate and overwhelmed, Eddie contemplates suicide, convinced that there's no escape from this nightmare. But just as he's about to make his final decision, he spots one remaining pill in a tin can. A flicker of hope sparks within him. Could this last pill offer the escape he desperately needs? As Eddie reaches for the last pill, his hand trembles, and just as he's about to ingest it, the pill slips from his grasp, clattering onto the floor. Before he can react, the door to his apartment bursts open, and the gangster, flanked by his men, storms inside. The gangster spots the pill, picks it up, and, without hesitation, injects it into his own veins. The scene erupts into chaos as the epic fight scene unfolds. The drug seems to heighten the gangster's strength and ferocity, but Eddie, in a desperate bid for survival, fights back with brutal precision. He grabs a nearby knife and, in a swift motion, drives it into the gangster's chest. Blood pours from the wound, pooling onto the floor. In a moment of insanity and desperation, Eddie takes a daring step. He sips the blood, hoping that the drug within it will work as the pill once did. To his surprise, it does. The drug courses through his body, and Eddie's mind sharpens, his senses heightening to an almost supernatural level. With the newfound strength and speed granted by the drug, he takes down the remaining men one by one, effortlessly outmaneuvering them. Each strike is deadly, and Eddie's movements are fueled by the same cold calculation that once guided his every decision when he was under the drug's influence. As the last of the gangster's men falls, Eddie stands in the blood-soaked room, breathing heavily, his body surging with energy. He's won, but at what cost? As the scene shifts, Eddie learns that the old tycoon has passed away. The atmosphere is tense as Eddie sits next to the tycoon's driver, his mind racing. He turns to the driver and demands to know how the tycoon died, especially since the driver had stolen the drugs from Eddie's house and given them to the tycoon. The driver, visibly shaken, hesitates. Then adds, "It wasn't me who took the drugs, Eddie. It was your lawyer. He stole them from your house and used them." Without wasting a moment, the driver and Eddie sneak inside the lawyer's apartment, cautious in their movements. He searches the apartment and finds the stash of drugs hidden in a drawer. Years have passed, and Eddie now works as a trusted aide to the governor, his life stable and far removed from the chaos of his past. One day, a man approaches him with a message that takes him by surprise. The owner of a pharmaceutical company wants to meet him. To Eddie's astonishment, the owner is none other than his old boss, the man he once worked for during the darkest days of his life. The owner, now polished and presenting himself as a respectable businessman, greets Eddie warmly. He explains that he has left his criminal past behind and now runs a legitimate pharmaceutical company. His business focuses on manufacturing the same drug Eddie once relied on. With practiced charm, he offers Eddie a lucrative partnership, promising wealth and influence. "We could revolutionize the market," he says. "Together, we could make millions." Eddie listens, but remains unmoved. "I don't take that drug anymore," he says firmly. "Instead, I've been working on ways to reduce its side effects and make it safer, for myself and others, not for profit." Despite the owner's persuasive pitch, Eddie resolutely declines the offer. To emphasize his point, Eddie demonstrates a rare side effect of the drug. He predicts that a nearby cab driver will soon have an accident. Moments later, the prediction comes true, leaving the owner visibly unsettled. Angered, the owner threatens Eddie, warning that rejecting the deal could lead to dire consequences. Unfazed, Eddie meets his gaze and replies, "You'll never catch up to me." With those words, Eddie turns and walks away, leaving the owner speechless. The movie ends on a powerful note, showcasing Eddie's triumph over the drug, his past, and the forces that once sought to control him. His resilience and intellect have ensured his victory,